College students, we're almost done. We got 2 more chapters to go, and I'm going to do chapter 18 in this video. It's about life of the Cenozoic Era. By now, you should know that the Cenozoic Era goes from 65 million years ago till today. So we're living in the Cenozoic Era. You should also know that the Cenozoic Era is called the Age of the Mammals. Let's talk about how life evolved during the Cenozoic Era. Of course, you know by now that the dinosaurs disappeared 65 million years ago. So did the pterosaurs and those marine reptiles that we talked about. And when the dinosaurs became extinct, there was a big change in the world, biologically speaking. The mammals would rise and evolve and fill the ecological niches of the world. They diversified on land, in the seas, and in the air, and dominate the planet today. We also had angiosperms dominate the plant world. Angiosperms, we talked about before, include all plants that have nuts, fruits, flowers, or are grasses, and they have covered seeds. So they don't need to use cones like gymnosperms to spread their seed. And instead, what they do is they use the animal world, including birds and mammals and insects, to spread their seed, to attract them through pollen, flowers, fruits, and nuts. This is a creature called a foraminifera. Foraminifera are tiny planktonic organisms. There are trillions of them in the ocean, and they build their little shells, which we call tests. And this is magnified underneath an electron microscope so you can see it. But they're very small, much smaller than a pea. And they're the base of the food chain in the oceans, upon which all larger invertebrates and vertebrates depend. Gastropods, phylum Mollusca, class Gastropoda, and they start to really diversify and explode in numbers during the Cenozoic Era. Class Gastropoda. Bivalves, phylum Mollusca, class Bivalvia. They also start to explode in numbers and in diversity, numbers of species. We rarely see brachiopods anymore. They're pretty rare in the Cenozoic Era. Brachiopods were very common during the Paleozoic Era, 542 to 245 million years ago. And since most of the sedimentary rocks that we see in Tennessee are Paleozoic in age, Paleozoic era in age, we find lots of brachiopods in the great state of Tennessee. But if you look at parts of the country or the world that have younger Cenozoic rocks, such as New Jersey, Alaska, you're going to find a lot of bivalves because there's lots of younger rocks there. Bivalves basically dominate in the Mesozoic and the Cenozoic, whereas before that it was the brachiopods. Echinoderms and phylum Echinoidea, including sand dollars and sea urchins. Here you can see their classic five-fold symmetry for these benthic organisms. They become very, very abundant during the Cenozoic Era. Phylum Echinodermata, class Echinoidea, and their benthic organisms. Here's something quite interesting for you. So the dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago. That means the big predators were gone, like Tyrannosaurus rex and the other theropod dinosaurs. So the mammals, there were no big predators, mammals, during the Mesozoic era. But once the dinosaurs disappeared, opportunity knocked for the other types of animals to evolve to fill the ecological niche, which we call that of the predator. And at first, it wasn't clear as to who would occupy that spot. At the very beginning of the Cenozoic, giant Cenozoic birds like this one were the most common predators. Let's take a and they dominated for a long time. Let's take a look at some of these. Giant Cenozoic birds. Look how big this bird is. That's a horse in its mouth. So there were all kinds of big predatory birds. And when I first saw these birds as a little kid, I was amazed. My parents took me to the Smithsonian Institute and showed me the fossils of these giant birds. Here's one chasing a deer. Notice they had very strong rear limbs and grasping front limbs. A large head, characteristic of all carnivores. Carnivores require a larger brain. To hunt, it requires planning your attack, protecting your kill, and all of those skills require intelligence. And these birds were pretty intelligent compared to birds today. Here you can see one chasing down an antelope. That's how big these birds were. And these were they would hunt in twos and threes and track down all of the prey of the time. Here you can see the skeleton that I saw in the Smithsonian. You can see a typical Cenozoic predatory bird. What led to the demise of these giant birds? Well, at first there was very little competition from mammals, but mammals eventually evolved into a variety of different predators which hunted down these giant birds, including the saber-toothed cats. So by about 10 million years ago, we had saber-toothed cats, very muscular cats with characteristic long two canine teeth coming out the front. These were quite common during the Ice Age too, and we find their skeletons all across the Johnson City area. If you ever go to the Grave Fossil Site Museum, you'll see we found many of their skeletons. So one of the big reasons why the giant birds did not survive is because these saber-toothed cats hunted them down. Look at those long two front teeth, characteristic of the saber-toothed cats. Another predator that evolved during the Cenozoic that was very dangerous were the cave bears. Cave bears no longer exist, but you can see how they were quite large, and as the name implies, they lived in caves. Very muscular bears, much more muscular than modern bears. And these were the bane of the existence of our ancestors. And our ancestors lived in the caves during the Ice Age. Obviously, sometimes they walked into the wrong cave, and the cave bears would kill them. You'd often find human bones in these cave bear caves, and they would stack the heads and the torsos in different places, almost like a collection for them. And so these were another type of big problem that are the cave bears, big predators. Another extinct form of predator that was quite common during the Ice Age is the dire wolves. Dire wolves obviously no longer exist. Look how big a dire wolf is compared to a modern wolf. And a modern wolf is a huge predator. But look, if you can see here, the dire wolf was much bigger. And our ancestors were very afraid of dire wolves. They would hunt down humans. We had many predators out there that were much bigger and stronger than us, including the cave bears, dire wolves, and saber-toothed cats. But we had one thing. We had our intelligence, and that would eventually lead to our success. And also other features that are involved with for hominids. Hominids are humans, including modern humans, Homo sapiens, and ancient humans, which we'll take a look at in the next chapter. So you can see here that this is the Mesozoic era, and here's 65 million years ago, and this is the Cenozoic era. Here you can see that all of these modern forms of mammals, all of these, and these are orders, kings play chess on fragile glass stools. So not a phylum class, but classes divided into orders. All of these orders of mammals, from Monotremata, which are monotremes, Marsupialia, which are marsupials, etc. Cetacea, we're going to talk about that. They're wolves. Proboscidia, which are elephants. All of these evolved during the Cenozoic era. Why did mammals evolve during the Cenozoic era into the myriad of different forms we have today? It's because they could. During the Mesozoic era, mammals could not evolve. All of the ecological niches were occupied by dinosaurs. So the big predator spot was taken up by the theropods. The herbivore spot was taken up by the 6 type of plant-eating dinosaurs we talked about. Ankylosaurs, pachycephalosaurs, ornithopods, stegosaurs, and sauropods. So as soon as the dinosaurs disappeared, then that was an opportunity for the mammals to evolve into all of the different forms we see today. We talked about there being different types of mammals: monotremes, marsupials, placentals, and multiturbiculates, if you watched the previous videos. Don't forget what we talked about earlier on. Monotremes lay eggs like the spiny anteater and the duck-billed platypus. They're the most primitive of mammals. Marsupials are pouched mammals. They have pouches where they hold their babies, and inside the pouches the mothers have milk teats. That's how they get their food. But 90% of mammals today are placentals. And these are mammals where the mother has food source within her womb called a placenta, and that allows the baby to be protected inside the mother instead of in a pouch, and grow to a more mature form before birth, giving it a higher chance of survival. And in biology, only the fittest survive. That's why the placentals survived, because they had an advantage, and that's the advantage is the placenta. So here you can see it. 90% of the mammals are placentals, and placentals have an advantage because the baby can grow into fuller development in the uterus. This is a primitive form of mammal called a multituberculate. This particular one has an arboreal tail, meaning it has a tail that has a muscle in it, so that this mammal, if it could stay up in the trees and use this tail to hang onto tree branches. And then you can see the 2 long teeth on the bottom of this. It's almost squirrel sized, this particular multituberculate. Multituberculate mammals no longer exist. They died out 30 million years ago. Let's talk a little bit about... Okay, this is kind of interesting to some people, but mammals grew quite large during the Pleistocene epoch. For example, this particular one is 30 centimeters long, which is more than a foot long. A rat more than a foot long. Why do mammals grow so large? Why did they grow so large during the Ice Age? Well, there's a reason for that, and it's called Cope's rule. What is Cope's rule? Cope's rule in biology states that the colder the weather is, the bigger animals get. Why do you think that would be the case? If you look at humans, it's the same. If your ancestors came from a colder part of the planet, they have bigger bones, they have bigger bodies, they're taller. But if your ancestors came from near the equator, they're skinnier and they're smaller. The same thing in the animal world. Why, when you go up to the colder places, you see huge polar bears and seals and walruses and large penguins? And why is that? That when you go to colder places, animals become bigger. Well, Cope's rule is true because it's always down to the same thing in biology. The reason why animals become bigger when they get in colder weather is there's an advantage to being bigger when you're living in colder weather. There's an advantage, and it gives you a higher chance of survival. If you have more body fat, you can withstand the cold better. And on the other hand, if you're near the equator, then being smaller and more small boned is going to give you an advantage because you would sweat less and you'd be able to you have an advantage in a warmer climate. Well, during the Ice Age or the Pleistocene epoch, conditions became cold, and as you might expect, mammals became huge, very large. Let's take a look at some of them. We could take a look at large Pleistocene mammals. Okay, here you can see these hairy elephants are called mammoths. Woolly mammoths. They had hair. They look like an elephant, don't they? Because they're closely related to elephants, but they're not the same. Look at their tusks, how they curve like this, inwards, like that. And these were larger than modern day elephants. Very common food source for early hominids, or early humans. The woolly rhinoceros. So not only did they become large, a lot of them grew hair to withstand the cold weather. You can see in North America, look how big the mammals got. This is related to the wolves. There's another predator here called Megatherium. There's woolly rhinoceros. This is not dangerous. This is a plant-eating mammal, and it has hooves. So mammals that have hooves are called ungulates. Ungulates are plant-eating mammals. So even though it's large, this is not a mammal that would threaten us. But these predators would be a threat to us. And they grew enormous during the Mesozoic era. Another example is the Irish elk. And you can still find these when you go to pubs in Ireland or Northern Ireland. You can see these huge antlers that were left behind from the Ice Age when these large Irish elk lived. Again, an example of Cope's rule. So when during the Pleistocene epoch, mammals became much larger and many of them grew more body hair to withstand the cold. We are going to, in the next chapter, start talking about primates. What are primates? Well, primates are monkeys, apes, and hominids, humans. And we're going to talk about those in the next chapter, so I'm going to skip that for now. So a primate is a monkey, an ape, or a hominid. Hominid includes modern humans and ancient humans. Carnivores evolved within mammals, and they develop specialized teeth for killing, including canine teeth. I can see those in my dog. You can see in the wolves and lions and tigers and bears. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my. You can also see shearing teeth that are made for chewing meat. These are specialized teeth in carnivores. And once again, carnivores have larger brains, and therefore they have larger brain cases. Hoofed mammals are plant eaters, and they mostly are quadrupeds. They walk on two legs. They have toes, and they are, once plant-eating mammals. They can eat either grass. Some mammals specialize in eating grass, and others specialize in eating the tender leaves on trees. Ungulates that specialize in eating tender leaves on trees, like the koala bear or sloths, they are called browsers. And ungulates that specialize in eating grass are called grazers. Things like cows and sheep and goats are grazers. They also evolved. Ungulates that have an odd number of toes, like the horse and the rhinoceros, are called perissodactyls. Ungulates that have an even number of toes, like camels and pigs, are called ardiodactyls. Dactyls means toes. Ardio means even in Latin. Perisso in Latin means odd. I made a list here for you here of perissodactyls. Those are ungulates with odd numbers of toes. Include horses, zebras, tapirs, and rhinoceros. We're going to take a look at horses and see how they evolved. They're an interesting perissodactyl. Ardiodactyl mammals: pigs, hippos, giraffes, camels, moose, goats, bison, and deer. Much more common are the ardiodactyls, or the ungulates with an even number of toes. There's a big difference between ungulates that eat leaves, which are what we call browsers, and ungulates that eat grass, which are called grazers. If you look at ungulates like the koala bear or sloths or tapirs, they eat tender leaves off of trees, so they have this type of tooth, and that's called a low crown tooth. Low because the crown of the teeth is very short. It's a very small tooth. It's a delicate tooth, perfect for chewing up tender leaves. And we find these in ungulates, which we call browsers. Grazers, on the other hand, like buffalo and cows and sheep, goats, they have high crown teeth. Why do they have so much tooth enamel? Well, it's because grazers have to have a lot of tooth enamel. If you're going to eat grass, then there's a lot of sand and grit in there, and it wears away at the tooth enamel. So if you had a low crown teeth like this, you would get tooth decay and be so much pain you would die. You have to have a huge tooth with a lot of tooth enamel in a high crown tooth for your grazing ungulates, such as cows and sheep and goats. It's interesting to note that during the early part of the Cenozoic, most of the ungulates had low crown teeth, and therefore we know that they mostly ate tender leaves off of trees. But about 10-15 million years ago, grass became very common, and it replaced the old fern plains. And once grass became common, ungulates developed these high crown teeth to evolve to feed on this abundant food source. Here you can see some different ardiodactyls: deer, buffalo, giraffes, camels. All of these, hippos, peccaries, pigs, these are all have ardiodactyls. Do they have an odd or even number of toes? Do you remember? They have an even number of toes. Ardio means even. One of the most interesting things when we're looking at, as far as the perissodactyls go, is the horses. Here you can see how horses have evolved over time, from 56 million years ago till now. Let's take a look at horses. At the very beginning of the Cenozoic era, this is what horses looked like. This is Hycocitherium. Here's a modern horse, which we call Equus. Do you know? And okay, so this is how the horses have evolved in appearance. We can also see how their teeth have evolved, and we can also see how the number of toes they have has evolved. Okay, so how have horses changed? In other words, how have horses evolved? Has body size increased over time? Yes. Why did that occur? Well, there must be an advantage to having a larger body. What would the advantage be of having a larger body? Well, there's many possibilities. One is if you're a larger horse, maybe you're more able to fend off an attack by a predator. Also, during the mating competition, where males have to compete with females, having a larger body might give you an advantage if you're in a fight with another male. So, horse body size increased. Notice that the head size increased too, indicating that they became more intelligent. Why would higher intelligence be an advantage for a horse? Well, if you were a bit more intelligent, maybe you could think of different ways of escaping from predators. Look at the teeth. They go from low crown teeth to high crown teeth. What does that tell you? It tells us that the horses at the beginning of the Cenozoic were browsers. They ate the tender leaves off of trees. Then later on, about 15 million years ago, horses almost all have high crown teeth. Why? Because horses learned to eat grass. Also, look at the number of toes of horses. They go from 5 to 3 to now we only have 1 toe, which we call the hoof. What's the advantage of a horse having less toes? It could run faster. Maybe it would have a higher chance of survival. We could clearly see that horses have evolved from smaller body size to larger body size, smaller brains to larger brains, from low crown teeth to high crown teeth, and from larger number of toes to now only 1 toe. Sometimes you get horses that still are born with 3 toes. It's a remnant from the past, a vestigial organ. Another type of mammal. So a mammal belongs, and I think you remember from our fossil labs, all vertebrates belong to kingdom what? Animalia. I'm sorry. All mammals belong to kingdom Chordata. They're all chordates. And then the class would be Mammalia. The order would be Proboscidia. So order Proboscidia is a type of mammal. And there are 3 main types you need to know about as far as Proboscidia. When you think of Proboscidia, please think about elephant-like creatures. And there are 3 main types you need to know about: mammoths, mastodons, and elephants. Obviously, only the elephant exists today. They exist in Africa and India today, and we all know what an elephant looks like. But order Proboscidia are characterized by floppy ears, tusks, and a long trunk. This is the modern elephant. 2 extinct forms of order Proboscidia that were very important food sources for hominids during the Pleistocene are the woolly mammoth and the mastodon. And what's the difference? Well, these ancient forms of Proboscidia, you can see, had hair on them, with the woolly mammoth having longer hair and living in the colder parts of the world. We can also see the difference in tusks. Notice how an elephant's tusks point down, whereas a mastodon's tusk will point up and curve upwards. The woolly mammoth's tusks are the largest, and they go down and then up, and they point towards each other at the ends. These were quite common order Proboscidia, Proboscidia during the Pleistocene epoch, and an important food source for our ancestors, for everybody. Another type of order that you need to know about are whales. And whales and dolphins and porpoises are called cetaceans. A cetacean is a whale, a dolphin, or a porpoise. Cetaceans. Look how huge these mammals became during the Pleistocene. You could see this is a beaver. Can you imagine a beaver 10 foot tall? Well, they actually existed in Florida and California. We find their bones. There's no doubt about it. We find these enormous 18 feet long glyptodons. They're related to today's armadillo, but they're different because they had a mace at their end of their tail. All indications that mammals became large during the Pleistocene. And they're preserved all the time, like this Mastodon and this Mammoth. You could tell by the tusks this is a mammoth and this is a mastodon. That were recovered in the La Brea tar pits, which are Pleistocene in age. And so you can go out to California and LA, you could go to the museum there and look at all those mastodon skeletons and mammoth skeletons. You don't have to go that far though. Just drive to Johnson City to the Gray Fossil Site and you'll find mastodon fossils there that used to live, indicating they lived in East Tennessee during the Pleistocene epoch. And what happened now from 10,700 to 14,000 years ago is the ice started to retreat, and that changed the world. By 10,700 years ago, we had the Earth starting to warm up, and many of those large Pleistocene mammals became extinct. Saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, cave bears became extinct. Glyptodons became extinct because the warming weather does not favor large, hairy mammals. Hominids, however, thrived, and so did the other primates, monkeys and apes. Also, another reason why a lot of those large mammals became extinct is that as the human population expanded, and it started to expand very quickly after the Ice Age ended 10,700 years ago, is that humans had developed weapons to kill the large game, and that led to the extinction of many large mammals. Another thing that you want to bear in mind is that 3 million years ago, before 3 million years ago, North America and South America were separated by an ocean. Central America did not exist yet. And in the South America, you had mostly marsupials, and in North America, you had mostly placentals. But 3 million years ago, North America and South America collided, and two continents colliding, that's a continental convergent plate boundary, that formed a mountain range, and it formed Central America. Once Central America was formed 3 million years ago, the marsupials of South America could migrate north, and the placentals, mammals from North America, migrated south. Who won? It's always the same in biology. Whoever has more fit for survival is going to win. The placentals won out. There's an advantage placentals have, as that the babies grow protected within the mother's womb and in a more advanced form, more mature form, giving them a higher chance of survival. And so the placentals replaced all of those ancient marsupials that used to exist in South America. The invasion from the south did not succeed of the north because the marsupials were at a disadvantage, with the exception of the opossum, which had to have some advantage because it's the only marsupial that survived in the migration north from South America to North America. Okay, I'll make a video later on today.